today a group of farmers from North Queensland have made the trip to Canberra as part of their campaign to get national focus on what they claim is the ongoing demonisation of Australia's agricultural industry. While in Canberra, they're also walking the corridors to drum up support for their protest against new Queensland state government legislation that they say will hit farmers and farming communities up north hard. Anastasia Palaszczuk's Reef Protection Bill, they say, will impose new agricultural standards for all sugarcane, beef cattle grazing, banana, grain and horticultural production in areas near and not so near the reef. On the back of draconian land clearing laws, recent changes to environmental and mining regulations, Queensland's farmers are saying they've had enough and they're starting to fight back. To help coordinate their efforts, a new grassroots movement has been born. It's called the Green Shirt Movement, and it was established late last year, and in their own words, their objective is to push back against the fake Greens who have no connection to the land yet seek to control it with claims based on misinformation, ideology or a blatant social agenda under the guise of environmentalism. About time, I hear so many of you say. So who are they and what do they want to achieve with today's visit to Canberra? To discuss it all, let me bring in Mr Martin Bella, the Green Shirt Movement's coordinator and one of the movement's great supporters, climate scientist and free speech advocate, Professor Peter Ridd. Gentlemen, great to have you on the show. Thank you for making time. I want to start with you, Martin Bella. What is the Green Shirts Movement and what motivated you to basically take up arms against these green activists?
Look, for a long time we've faced criticism both from a certain section of the community and from our state government, state Labor government. You know, we're having lies told about us and we've actually thought the people that are listening to the lies aren't our natural enemy, it's the people telling those lies. So we decided that the best thing to do was to get together. Most of our peak bodies are siloed in their particular little industries. So we're across industry, we're across political parties. We are very politically active, but we're not party aligned. We give the average person an opportunity to have a say. We speak for rural, regional and reasonable people.
Peter Ridd, you're involved in this, I'm told, because one of the ways to attack what's being done, particularly in Queensland, but it's right across the board to agriculture, is the use of science as weaponising, I guess, the green environmental movement. And your argument is that not all of the science is scientifically tested, as some might claim.
No, that's right. So, for example, the new state reef laws, they're saying that mud coming off farms is killing the Great Barrier Reef. But as a scientist who collected more data on mud on the Great Barrier Reef than virtually any other, there is no mud from farms on the reef itself. There's a little bit on some of the tiny fringing reefs very, very close to the coast, but that's it. So this is one of the examples of science which we think needs to be better checked, and that's why I'm supporting the farmers to get better checking of the reef science, basically.
Martin, we know, there's a very sad case of a farmer in front of the courts in Queensland who fed starving cattle on his own property with mulga from his own property and is facing a $100,000 fine, which, for most households and small businesses would be just unaffordable, send you to the wall. Why do you think there's been such a move, particularly in Queensland, against agriculture? It's a great employer. It's great for the balance sheet of a state like Queensland, but it seems to be under attack with more and more laws coming out of this state government.
Look, I think what you've got is some people that are aggressively anti-agriculture. You cannot truly understand agriculture unless you've been involved in it. You can't farm from a desk in Queen Street or in Brisbane. And what we've had is an alienation of our urban environment and our rural and regional environment. We've seen veg laws, and just to tell you with veg laws, there were over 11,000 submissions put in by farmers and people that were going to be impacted, and yet not one change occurred. So you've got people in Brisbane that have academic qualifications. You've got farmers that have years of experience, and experience is recognised as a qualification, And many of us actually do have academic and scientific qualifications. But somehow we were trumped. No changes. You then saw trigger mapping, VMS for fishes. They're proposing different regulations on forestry. We've got these reef regulations which will devastate not only agriculture but rural and regional towns all the way up the coast. We've had maternity ward closures, we've had educational facilities closures. You know, one's got to ultimately ask what is behind this. To really dig deep on it, you'd probably be labelled as being a conspiracy theorist, but we're at the receiving end again and again and again. And it's time to just say no. For too long, we've worn this badge of apoliticism, our peak bodies, and that's gone on for ages. It's like it's a badge of honour. But we are in a situation that's intolerable. Unions have never been apolitical. We've seen workers' rights and pay increase over the last 30 years, and rightly so. So what's working? Is it apoliticism, or is it being active, directly active in the political process?
Well, of course, I think a lot of your grievance, quite rightly your grievance, is because you're right in the gun, I suppose, at this time in the political cycle, in the gun of being used in preference deals for inner city Green seats for Labor and other parties on the left to hold on to those seats by trading away everything that you have in the bush. I mean, looking at some of the detail of what's proposed in that legislation, I find it extraordinary. These rule changes that the government is yet to legislate, but it's in the Parliament in Queensland. The cost of a soil sample test because of fertiliser rules will go from about $120 up to over $1,000. And cattle farmers, even though some of the properties in question can be 900 or 1,000 kilometres from the reef, they'll be subject to all of these new regulations. Some of them, I'm told, 157 new standards. Peter Ridd, surely this is not scientifically based, is it? This is all about running an agenda on a Greens issue.
Well, there's certainly a lot of red tape that's going to tie up a lot of farmers, and I do believe that the government needs to check this science a lot more, because it's going to have a major effect on farms and have, in my view, absolutely no effect on the Great Barrier Reef either.
So Peter Ridd, who's driving the science here? Is it scientists? Is it modellers? Is it, you know, less capable people? Is it based on evidence, or is it based on what they think might happen?
A lot of it's based on what they think might happen, based on sometimes it's what they think has happened, but they actually haven't, in my view, looked at the evidence properly. For example, they say the farmers are killing the reef with pesticides, but when you looked at the actual data, there are no significant amounts of pesticides on the Great Barrier Reef. In almost all cases, the measurements show that they're undetectable. So it's been driven by our science organisations, in my view, that they are untrustworthy because they don't have good enough quality assurance processes for us to rely on the evidence that they provide.
What about the claim, Peter Ridd, that the crown of thorns starfish is linked to agricultural fertilisers and pesticides?
Well, this is a classic one. I mean, just last year a paper came out from a dozen or so of the crown of thorns starfish experts, and they say that this link is unresolved. And yet when you look at the documentation behind the legislation, they're saying it was farmers like Marty here who actually killed it. But that's not what is actually in the scientific literature. So this is another example of where we want this stuff checked. We want this evidence checked and properly challenged.
You know, if we ever talk about an issue like climate change, Peter Ridd, we're always told you can't argue with the scientists. Science is science, facts are facts. But that example of the crown of thorns starfish points to the fact that science is not yet resolved. And if science is not resolved, how can the politicians be legislating on something that's still an open question?
This is exactly it. So we've got to have a proper debate happening within science. Scientists like myself, who have just been excluded, and I'm certainly not the only one, need to be brought in to challenge the data properly, challenge the evidence. And once you've had that proper challenge, then we can see what we've left with. What we're asking for is the government to just hold off for a year or two while we do a proper antagonistic review of this science, of the evidence, and we can come back and decide after that whether we really need these new regulations or whether they need to be modified or just thrown out altogether.
Martin Bella, I don't understand, in a state like Queensland, it's the most decentralised of all of our states, meaning there's more people that live outside in the regions in Queensland in population terms than your capital city. It's not like that in other states. So in a state like Queensland, where you're built on agriculture and you've got such diversity in agriculture, why do you think the Queensland state government has gone to war with farmers and farming towns? Because we know if the farmers go, so do many of those regional towns.
Look, I'll be quite blunt. I think it's payback, because regional areas have the temerity to vote against the current government. It's not just agriculture, though. We've got to look at the effect. Scientists love to talk about symbiosis between organisms. There's a symbiosis between industries. And a lot of those small country towns, as soon as there's a problem, the answer to the question is always tourism. And it's an easy answer, but it's never truly correct. Now, the problem is, if agriculture and associated industries go into decline, we will see more empty shop windows in small country towns, towns that tourists come to when they go to the reef. And I'm afraid tourists, it's not a good look for a tourist. So, you know, a tourist is only of value if they can pull the money out of their wallet and spend it. So ultimately, I believe it will lead to the decline of tourism. We're trashing our reputation of the reef, which is not in anywhere near the state they're saying. It's in good condition. We're trashing it overseas. We're not getting visitors. The EU will use it as a way of declining a free trade agreement for our beef, because we're supposedly not meeting our environmental standards, when it's all based on what we believe is a lie.
So what do you want to see out of Canberra with your visit this week?
What we are asking and supporting Peter in asking for is basically an inquiry into the quality of the evidence that's being used to make legislation and regulation that is going to affect large numbers of people and industries. You know, we don't want to see our towns become basically welfare camps, and our kids have no future unless they move to Brisbane. So Peter has been very reasonable. He is not asking for the science to be overturned. He's asking for things to be checked, which is, and I have a background in science myself, like anyone that is afraid of what they're saying being questioned in science is not truly living up to the principles of science itself.
Well, precisely right, and that's been the whole debate about climate change, is anyone who wants to interrogate the science. And here is a professor of science, of climate science, doing just that, being shown the door tells you something untoward's going on. I want to go now, I'm sorry, I've run out of time, but Martin, how can people get involved to support your cause?
We do have a website, and we're very active on social media. If you look up Green Shirts Queensland, and our website is www.greenshirts.com.au. Yeah, get onto Facebook, read some of our stuff, become involved, join, come to our rallies, come to the events that we hold, listen to what's being said and read our stuff. We actually have a lot of people that join during the vegan activist situation, and I think we're here to educate just as much as we're here to fight back.
Well, Peter Reid, I bet you they rue the day they poked you in the eye, because you've got a bigger platform and a stronger voice than ever before. Thank you very much for your time tonight. And Martin Bella, good luck with your campaign for some common sense on these very important issues. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.